Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the International Guest Lecture Series organized by Quality System Laboratories by Smart University. First of all, let us praise to God in which because of His grace and mercy, we can attend this event in our best condition. Second of all, we would like to thank the Dean of Engineering Faculty Departments by Smart University, Dr. Sohin Asad, the third Vice Dean of Engineering Faculty Departments by Smart University, Professor Wahyudi Sutopo, the Head of Industrial Engineering Departments by Smart University, Dr. Eko Liquidanu, the Coordinator Lecturer of Quality System Laboratories by Smart University, Ms. Fahrina Fahma, Dr. Eko Pujianto, as Head of Magister Industrial Engineering Faculty Departments by Smart University, and Mrs. Ratnawulan Damayanti, and also the participants of the International Guest Lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly introduce myself. I am Vivi as the Master of Ceremony that will guide the International Guest Lecture, Qualitative Comparative Analysis Method, a configurational approach for understanding the system's complexity. Before we start, let me explain our agenda for today. The first agenda is opening. The second agenda is speech that will be delivered by the Dean of Engineering Faculty Departments by Smart University. The third agenda is the KZA webinar that will be delivered by Professor Claude Rubinson. The fourth agenda is question and answer. And finally, the last agenda is closing and verbalization. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start our agenda by praying individually according to our personal belief. Praying, begin. Enough. Moving to the next agenda, which is opening speech that will be delivered by Engineering Faculty Representative for the Dean of Engineering Faculty Departments by Smart University, Dr. Sohin Asad. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you Mbak Vivi ya. Terima kasih ya. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good evening and good morning for Dr. Claude Rubinson. Not mistaken, you are United States, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's in evenings, and in United States would be in the morning. Yeah. The honorable speaker, Dr. Claude Rubinson, the honorable head of master program and head of the undergraduate program, Dr. Eko Pujianto, Dr. Eko Liquidanu, and the lecturer, Ibu Fahrina Fahma, Dr. Retno Damayanti, and students and lecturers, all participants. My name is Sohin Asad. I'm the Dean of Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Sebelas Maret, Indonesia. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this International Guest Lecture organized by Department of Industrial Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Sebelas Maret, with the theme of the Quality Comparative Analysis Method, Configurational Approach for Understanding System Complexity yeah, by Dr. Claude Rubinson from University Houston downtown Texas, United States, and he is also the coordinator of GSA Network. We are really honored having you, Dr. Claude Rubinson, here in this wonderful lecture. This is a wonderful event for us to be with you, having you in this guest lecturer, international guest lecturer. As a Dean of Faculty of Engineering, I appreciate much for this initiative, providing the international experience for the students with a good academic atmosphere, and for the students and the lecturer in Department of Industrial Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Sebelas Maret. I do hope this lecturer will be a good experience and a wonderful experience for all the students, for all the participants, with more discussion. And especially for the speaker, for Dr. Claude Rubinson. We do hope that one day we can have you here in person in Indonesia, not only by webinar through the what they call through the virtual. Yeah, Indonesia is a very wonderful country, so it should be nice if we have your lecturer in person here in Indonesia. So then we will have a more discussing with you, and I do hope that one day we may develop more collaborative work with you, with your organization, and we are looking forward to see you in person here in Indonesia. Lastly, for all the participants, I wish you a great lecture and exciting discussion. Thank you. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Solin Asad, for the speech. The next agenda is Qualitative Comparative Analysis webinar. The speech will be delivered by Professor Claude Rubinson, which will be moderated by Dr. Taula Damayanti. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Taula Damayanti. Okay. Since 2005, she joined as lecturer at Industrial Engineering and as researcher at Quality System Laboratories Engineering Faculty Department, Maret University. She received doctoral degree from Industrial Engineering Gajah Mada University in 2021. Her research interests are quality system, project and mega project management, leadership, complexity system, and qualitative comparative analysis. Currently, Dr. Damayanti is conducting research in mega project and quality system for sustainability development goals. From this point, Dr. Ratnaula Damayanti will lead the following section. For Dr. Ratnaula Damayanti, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vivi. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Damayanti, and it is an honor for me to be the moderator of this session. In this session, we have a special speaker who is an expert of qualitative comparative analysis method from Department of Social Sciences, University of Houston, Downtown, Texas, United States. Okay, first, let me introduce our special speaker today. He is Claude Rubinson. Hello. And currently, he is an associate professor of sociology, University of Houston, Downtown. He got his bachelor degree from Emory University in 1996, master degree from University of Georgia in 2002, and PhD degree from University of Arizona in 2010, all in sociology. Mr. Rubinson has research interests in methodology, art, media, and culture, globalization and comparative political economy, also in healthcare delivery. He has many research articles which was published in reputable international journal, and also some books. And some of his articles and books were co-written with the founder of QCA, Professor Rajin. He was also developed QCA software such as FSQCA and Kualitas. He has obtained many awards related to his expertise in QCA, and what is listed here is only a small part of his awards. Besides being active in the sociology department at the University of Houston, Downtown, Mr. Rubinson is also active as a managing editor, co-director, and system administrator at the Compass Research Network. With his expertise, Mr. Rubinson has become a reviewer of many reputable international journals such as the American Journal of Managed Care, American Political Sciences Review, Journal of Operation Management, Information Sciences, and many others. Okay, let's get started this lecture. And this session will be divided into two sections. And the first time is for Mr. Rubinson to present his material for about 45 minutes. Then continued with the Q&A discussion between the participants and Mr. Rubinson for 15 until 20 minutes. Okay, please, Mr. Claude Rubinson, the time is yours.
Thank you very, very much for that introduction. And yes, it is very, very early here. So it's good to see so many people. Yes,
Good morning.
so selamat pagi.
Okay, selamat pagi. Yes, it's
okay. Okay. No, I want to thank you so much for inviting me and for that very, very warm introduction. A little bit about myself before I jump into the slides. Yes, I have been working with QCA for, well, I don't know, maybe 15 years now. I was trained by Charles Reagan at the University of Arizona, who invented qualitative comparative analysis. QCA has been, it was originally the first book I'll talk about briefly during the talk was published in 1987. And it really started to grow during the 1990s. And since the late 1990s and 2000s, it's really taken off. So I've been doing it for quite some time. That picture of me that you found is from when I was first starting to learn QCA. And I was like, I really need to get a more up-to-date picture on the internet. So thank you for that, because I was very, very young and innocent and naive back then. So that was fun. Okay, so let me share my slides again. If I can find that yet again. Okay. All right, so can everyone see that, or does it need to be a little bit bigger?
Okay,
good.
Clearly, yes, good.
Okay, all right. Well, that's just my introductory slide, so we don't need anything there. Okay, so during this talk, there are a few things I want to do. I want to provide you with just a quick review of readings about QCA, resources, software. There's a lot out there, and certainly if you're new to it, it can be a little intimidating to figure out where to start. I want to talk about the different varieties. Well, we'll talk about, there are basically two types of QCA, but some people talk about three, so we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll go into what is QCA itself. Very quickly, it is a formal method of qualitative research. Specifically, it's a formal implementation of the comparative method of analysis. It is, as a comparative method of analysis, it's an investigation in variance. And I will talk about what that means. I want to demonstrate the software so you can see a sort of brief stylized analysis, and talk a little bit more about QCA and what distinguishes it from conventional quantitative research. There are three basic components to it that I'll go through briefly. All data in QCA must be calibrated, which essentially means rescaling it onto a 0-to-1 scale. Calibration is a process of making measures semantically meaningful. So instead of simply knowing whether someone has higher income than someone else, what calibration does is allow you to define whether someone is rich or not. The other components of QCA are testing for necessary conditions and testing for sufficient conditions. And then talking a little bit about how to interpret the results of QCA, and concluding with the different types of projects that QCA can be used for. So, as I said, there are a lot of resources out there for learning QCA. The ones, the top four here are the ones that I highly, highly recommend. And I should say I sent these slides out, and I'm happy to share them. They'll also be on my website. So if you Google for my name, I'll put them up on my website, hopefully today. So I would say the most important book to read is Charles Reagan's Redesigning Social Inquiry. You can see it's a little bit dated at this point, but it's still the most important book to read. It's short, it's clear, it's concise. What is missing from it is mostly sort of new methodological developments that I don't think they can be very useful, but they're not always essential. But to understand what QCA is, this is a key book. The other one that I strongly recommend, it is a wonderful, wonderful book by Charles, is The Comparative Method. This is the original book from 1987. It is brilliant. The big difference is, because it's so much older, is it is sort of much more limited in the sort of methodological scope and the techniques that we use nowadays. The other thing that is originally QCA was only for crisp sets for dichotomous data. So everything had to be 0 or 1, true or false, present or absent. With fuzzy set QCA, which is what Redesigning Social Inquiry describes, you can have this full range of 0 to 1. But the logic is exactly the same, and The Comparative Method is just a wonderful, wonderful book. It is also a book that kind of drives me crazy, because I will be working on some problem and I'll be like trying to figure out something about QCA, and then I have some thought and I go back to The Comparative Method and like, oh my gosh, Charles talked about it decades ago in a footnote somewhere. I was like, okay. So I'm constantly sort of rediscovering stuff that he already sort of knew about. It's a little frustrating. There are 2 very recent publications. These just came out and they're both very, very good. Patrick Mello's Qualitative Comparative Analysis, Introduction to Research Design and Application. This is an introductory text. It's very comprehensive. It is very usable. I was one of the technical reviewers on it, so I know it very well. And it is really quite wonderful. And I highly, highly recommend it. I've already started using it as a sort of go-to reference. And then Awana, Schneider, and Toman have just released a text on conducting QCA with R. And it's very up to date and it's very nice as well. So if you use R, we'll go through the different software packages, but many people are using the R package. This is a very, very good resource. There are a couple others here that I've listed. A number of my own papers, which I'm a little biased towards. The Common Errors in QCA is just a short piece that a few of us put together on stumbling blocks that people run into when first working with QCA. And so I recommend this. It's available on the Compass website, which is listed below. And then there are 2 pieces that I wrote with Charles Reagan about comparative research. They're a little bit dated at this point, but they're sort of broad overviews of the method. And I think that they're very good sort of short introductions to what QCA is. A very nice text by Charles Reagan and Pierre Fitz was released a few years ago, Intersectional Inequality. This really shows how to do configurational comparative analysis, how to do QCA well. And it has one of the best discussions of how to perform calibration properly and how to do it well. So again, it's sort of a short book, but it's very, very nice. So I highly recommend that one. And then the main resource you want to know about is Compass. That is with 3 S's, which always confuses people. This is the International Inter-University QCA Consortium. I'm the co-director of Compass, and we try to be a central hub for all QCA-related activity. So we're posting news and events and trainings. We've got various resources. We maintain a bibliography. It's a little out of date right now, but we're actually working on it right now, trying to bring it up to date. So we've got bibliography of like every text, every book about QCA, many, not, maybe most, but certainly not all articles about QCA. There's a working paper series. So this is something that there's a mailing list that you can sign up for to be informed of updates, but you can also just go to the website. And I maintain the website, so any errors there, you know who to blame. The other thing that is not on this slide that I should announce, this is, I guess, going to be the first public announcement of this, is that we are, myself, Pierre Fiss, and Gary Gertz, who's a political scientist, are organizing a QCA conference in the United States for next year. It'll be the first week in April here in Houston. And it's going to be 3 days. There's going to be a training seminar and then paper presentations and workshops and roundtables and all of that. And that has not been formally announced yet, but it will be announced within the next couple of days. So you can go to Compass to find out about that. And it would be wonderful if anyone wants to attend. Okay. Let me just, so we'll go through this a little bit. Software packages, you can see that there are a lot of software packages available for QCA. The ones in blue are the ones that are they're complete. So you can actually sort of fully conduct QCA with them, and they are actively maintained. Actually, that's a little bit of a lie in the case of Kirk, my software. I haven't updated it in a while because I'm going to rewrite it. So I should probably not put that in blue anymore. The most popular packages are going to be FSQCA, and I guess this is laid out in a way of showing the evolution of these packages. So originally there was just this QCA package by Dross and Reagan from 1992. There were two main branches built off of that. One is Tosmana by Lasse Cronqvist. And then the other was FSQCA by Charles Reagan, Chris Dross, and Sean Davey. The main packages being used today are FSQCA and the R package by Adrian Dusa. Along with the R package, there is this add-on set methods package. And so I think most people who use the R package also use the set methods package. There are some other ones that aren't really maintained anymore and that type of thing. But so the blue ones are the ones you want to look at. Myself, so they all have sort of different features. The R package is sort of a kitchen sink package. So it has lots and lots of features. It's for that reason also the most confusing. FSQCA is, sorry, I have a new kitten and she's crazy and she keeps jumping on my lap. I apologize for that. So the R package is sort of the most difficult to use in a lot of ways. That new textbook helps a lot with that. And Adrian Dusa has also written a very comprehensive text on it as well. FSQCA is a little bit more limited, but can do everything that you need it to do. My software is actually the most limited, which is a problem for some, for trying to do certain types of analysis. Myself, I tend to use them all. I bounce back and forth and use them all because they all have sort of different features. My software is really good for sort of fast, iterative analysis. That's one of the things, just going back and like, okay, what if I change this condition? What if I drop this condition? What if I add this condition? It's very good for sort of doing a lot of comparisons. And that's really important when conducting QCA. And so I'll bounce back and forth between them, but most people use either FSQCA or the R package. Okay. All right. When you get into reading about QCA, you're going to very quickly hear about 3 forms of QCA: CSQCA, FSQCA, and MVQCA. I will describe these very quickly. So the comparative method, I mentioned this before, it describes what we now call crisp set QCA. This is where every condition, every variable either needs to be 0 or 1. It needs to be dichotomous. So everything's, the person is rich or not. Okay. In fuzzy set social science, Reagan was trying to move away from being restricted by crisp set analysis by just having dichotomies and introducing the idea of fuzzy sets where you can have partial degrees of membership. So you're, you could be fully in the set of rich people or partially in the set of rich people. Fuzzy set social science does not describe QCA. Okay, it develops an alternative technique called fuzzy set analysis, which is totally coherent on its own, but has fallen out of favor because now most people interested in QCA are doing what we call FSQCA or fuzzy set QCA. Redesigning social inquiry introduced FSQCA formally, and it unifies crisp set QCA and fuzzy set QCA. What happens is people will hear about crisp set QCA and fuzzy set QCA and think that they're different techniques. They are not. They use the exact same algorithms. What we realized when we were working on fuzzy set QCA is that crisp set QCA is simply a special form of fuzzy set QCA. And so all of the packages, or at least the main packages, FSQCA, my software Kirk, and the R packages, they all use the RSI algorithms, and they just have a single algorithm for both crisp set and fuzzy set QCA. Finally, you will also hear about something called MVQCA, that's multi-valued QCA. That was introduced, I'm going to go back one slide. That was introduced in Tosmana as an alternative to trying to deal with the problem of dichotomous conditions and being restricted to dichotomous conditions. Multi-value QCA, it introduces an alternate syntax, but it's really just crisp set QCA behind the scenes. So my software doesn't support multi-value QCA. Charles's FSQCA software does not support multi-valued QCA because you can always simply decompose your multi-valued conditions into a series of dichotomies. And so that's what I always do, and I actually think that that makes more sense. The R package does support multi-value QCA, and then Tosmana does as well, of course. Okay, so I've used the letters QCA a whole lot. What is it actually? QCA is sort of nothing more than a formalization of the comparative method using Boolean algebra. That, of course, begs the question, what's the comparative method? The comparative method has a very, very long history in social research. It goes by many, many different names. So comparative research, small n analysis, comparative is what it is a technique used to study diversity, a technique that seeks to identify the similarities and differences across cases. And so what we're looking for when we do QCA, when we do comparative analysis, is to identify and analyze invariant relationships, that is, relationships that are stable across time, and conditions that are associated with one another amongst the cases that you're looking at. And once you start looking for invariance, this rapidly, when you start thinking about causal analysis, this quickly can be interpreted as a search for necessity and sufficiency, for identifying necessary and sufficient conditions. We'll talk more about all of that. So QCA, when it was originally invented, when you read the 1987 comparative method book, it was proposed as a small n analysis, maybe up to medium n. And still today, most QCA analyses are use around 15 to 50 observations. So, pretty modest, but that is not required. And large N analyses in the hundreds to thousands, we're not talking big data, but into hundreds, thousands of observations are growing rapidly, and more people are using QCA for large N analysis. There's no problem with that. There's no problem with large N. There's no problem with small n, because since QCA is based on Boolean algebra, not linear algebra, it's not restricted by degrees of freedom. And so it works very well for small and medium n. The other thing that you'll read about comparative research QCA being case-oriented versus condition-oriented or variable-oriented. There's some discussion about this, but most people doing QCA very much see comparative research and QCA as being very case-oriented, in that what you're really trying to do is try to understand your cases, and in particular, the types of cases that you have and how one group of cases might differ from another group of cases. You're really trying to understand, why does this group of cases have the outcome that you're interested in, and this other group of cases does not. I am very strong on this side of very much seeing comparative research as case-oriented, but in general, I think most people, even when they're doing sort of very large N and they're not that close to the cases, they don't know all the individual details of the cases, still see QCA as a case-oriented technique. Okay. So I mentioned invariant relationships. What do I mean by this? All it really means is that certain aspects of your cases, they tend to co-occur. And so I always like to use this Anna Karenina quote about, where he introduces, Tolstoy introduces it. It says, all happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. This is a statement about invariance. That if you look at happy families, the group of happy families, they all have something in common with each other. But if you look at unhappy families, they're going to have different reasons that they're unhappy. And this is a very QCA-like statement, because we, in QCA researchers are very interested in diversity and causal complexity, and how cases or groups of cases are similar or different to each other. And so that's very important for us to understand, not just averages and general tendencies and general trends, but to really understand, oh, this is why the outcome occurred in this case, this is why the outcome occurred in this other case, and this is why the outcome didn't occur in these other cases. And those can be similar reasons or different reasons. And that's what Tolstoy is getting at. Other sort of examples that I like to use of invariance. So tenured faculty tend to have many publications. Religious fundamentalists tend to be politically conservative. And then HIV causes AIDS, smoking causes lung cancer, and the coronavirus causes COVID. And let me give you some examples of this. These are all set theoretic Boolean statements. So there is a group here of the set of tenured faculty. There is the set of people with many publications, and there is a set theoretic relationship between them, right? We are saying that tenured faculty generally have a lot of publications, but not always, all right? So we've got this group here who have, of tenured faculty, most tenured faculty have lots of publications, but there are some tenured faculty who don't. There is a much larger set of people with many, many publications who are not tenured faculty. So there's an asymmetry in QCA, and QCA respects that asymmetry. And that's really key to understanding how to conduct QCA. We have the set of political conservatives. There are lots of political conservatives, but most, if you look across the world, are not religious fundamentalists. In the set of religious fundamentalists, many are politically conservative, but not all. So again, we have a set theoretic relationship here that says there's a link here, but again, there's asymmetry. It does not need to be perfect. We have two sets here. When we move into sort of medical, we have the set of people who are HIV negative that is disjoint from the set of people with AIDS, right? Because of course you have to be HIV positive to have AIDS. So what we're really saying is that the set of people who are HIV positive, that is a superset of the set of people with AIDS. And here we have a perfect set theoretic relationship. Right, the other ones were not. They're imperfect. This is perfect because you cannot get AIDS without first being HIV positive. Okay. So these are the types of statements that QCA ends up being able to make. What does this look like mathematically? I already showed you some Euler diagrams of superset subset relationships. The Euler or Venn diagrams are also very popular, of course. Those work when you have crisp sets and cases are in the set or out. When you are working with fuzzy sets, what you're looking for, what you use is an XY plot, a scatter plot. And what you're looking for here is, are the cases located above or below the diagonal? If you have your cases, I'm not going to go into the math, you probably understand it already, but if you have your cases falling below the diagonal, more or less, what you have is a relationship of necessity. That's saying that in order to achieve a particular level of Y, you have to have at least a particular level of X. The inverse is the case for sufficient conditions. There, what we're looking for is, are your cases all completely, entirely, or mostly above the diagonal? Essentially, does your value of Y tend to be greater than your value of X? So that's the basic math. The basic math is not that difficult. The underlying mathematics of QCA really isn't that difficult. Okay. So a couple of things to just sort of pay attention to, because certainly if you're coming from a more traditional quantitative background, these can be stumbling blocks for people who are learning QCA. The main thing to understand, and the reason I put in examples of imperfect set theoretic relationships, is that we are not implying determinism. We're also not implying stochasticism, but we're not implying determinism because it can certainly be the case that a condition is almost always necessary or almost always sufficient, right? So tenured faculty almost always have to have many publications, but there are cases of faculty being tenured without a lot of publications. And that always really irritates me, and I get very frustrated by it. But it's good for them. They did really well. So QCA is not vulnerable to just having a single disconfirming case or a small number of disconfirming cases, and that's a stumbling block for some people. It also, QCA is, I would argue, more intuitive. If you're already sort of well steeped in statistical analysis, you start to sort of think in that way. But really, this, how we think about causation and causality really is fundamentally set theoretic. So, I have the statement here. A subset of people exposed to COVID will contract, or SARS, will contract COVID-19, whether they are vaccinated or not, right? So that's a set theoretic statement. The total set of people, whether vaccinated or not, a subset will become sick with COVID-19. But the overwhelming majority of serious illnesses and deaths occur among the set of unvaccinated individuals, right? So these are set theoretic statements, and all of the public health initiatives right now are trying to move people from one set to another, move people from the set of unvaccinated individual or unvaccinated individuals or partially vaccinated individuals to the set of fully vaccinated individuals. These set theoretic relationships result in statements like don't smoke to avoid lung cancer, right? Because people with lung cancer are overwhelmingly a subset of people who smoke. Wear condoms to avoid STDs. Academy Awards, the most popular or the highest awards for films in the U.S., which is something I study. They are awarded to films that are both popular and critically acclaimed. So to win an Academy Award, it's not enough for all the critics to like your film. It also has to be popular with the audiences and have made a whole lot of money. And then what this also suggests is that particular interventions may work in one context, but not another, because those contexts constitute their own sets. So it may be a small versus a large city, public versus a private university, that certain interventions only work under certain conditions. So this is the basic idea of invariant relationships. Okay, I want to do a quick demonstration of software just so you can see how this works. Let me grab this. Okay. Whoops. So hopefully you can see this okay. Okay, so this is my software Kirk. Looks very bland right now. I'm going to open up a data set. This is a data set. Let me try to make it a little bigger. And I hope you can see this. Okay. Details aren't too important. I want you to get the basic idea here. So this is a data set that Cliff Brown and Terry Boswell, they were at Emory University where I did my undergrad. Terry Boswell was my advisor, in undergrad. They did this QCA analysis where what they were interested in were, there's a wave of US steel worker strikes in 1919, basically. And they were trying to figure out what were the conditions under which African Americans broke ranks with the Union? When did they cross the picket line and go back to work versus when did they align with the Union? And so they did sort of in-depth case analysis on the set of cities here, the strikes that happened here. I think there are 18. 16, I guess. And so they did sort of in-depth case studies on all of these, and then they ran a QCA on it to try to figure it out. So their outcome, which I'm setting here, was black strike breaking for this part of the analysis. There's more to the analysis, but for this part of the analysis, their outcome is black strike breaking. And they originally hypothesized, after doing their case studies, that there would be two conditions that led to black strike breaking. One was there a recent influx of Black workers into the city, right? With basically the idea, people have just moved to the city, they need jobs, etc. And then the other was, how strong was the union? If you had a weak union that couldn't resist as much, then they expected more black strike breaking. So they ran a QCA, and here's the basic, this is the raw data. The first step in a QCA is you take this data and you create what is called a truth table, which simply lists the different types of cities that you have, or the types of cases that you have. So with two conditions, you have 4 types of cases. And what they found when they did the analysis is that in 3 cities where you had both recent Black migration and a weak union, you did have black strike breaking. The consistency is the percentage here for crisp set of cases that have the outcome. In cities that either didn't have either of them or didn't have recent Black migration but did have a weak union, those cities did not have Black strike breaking, so they're all listed here. And then there's this interesting one in the second row where they had 5 cases total. This is recent Black migration, but did not have a weak union, so had a strong union. And in 4 of the cases, there was Black strike breaking, but in one case in Cleveland, there was not. And so Cliff Brown and Terry Boswell said, wait, what is going on with Cleveland? What this suggests is that Cleveland is different from Buffalo, Chicago, Gary, and Johnstown in some way that is not captured by this analysis. Okay, and this is the crucial aspect of QCA, is to say, wait, we would think that these cases should all act similarly. That's the idea of invariance. But in this case, we had one city that is acting differently. What's going on here? So they went back to their cases and they did more analysis, and specifically, they were looking at, what was it, Cleveland? Yeah, they were looking at Cleveland and saying, okay, what's going on there? And they found a few other conditions, but the one that they sort of looked at was there a repressive government? And they said, okay, basically, did the government side with the union or industry? So they bring repressive government into the analysis. They rerun the analysis, create a new truth table, and lo and behold, it works. Cleveland now is different. It exists in its own row. And so what they realized was the difference between those 4 cities and Cleveland was the presence of a repressive government? Yeah, or not. Is it RG? It's actually, did the government align with the, I said it backwards. It's, did the government support the union or not? So I said it backwards. But where the government supported the union, then you had Black strike breaking. Where it didn't, then you did not have Black strike breaking. I apologize for that error. After this, after you get a clean truth table that you can explain all of your different cases, you can reduce it to a set of Boolean equations. That's actually not the one that they like to use. I'll explain that in a second. And what they found was that their actual solution was whether there was recent Black migration and the position of the government with respect to the union. And that's what explained whether Black strike breaking occurred or not. So QC has this iterative aspect to it. That's the example that I want to give of how the software works. Obviously, different software works in slightly different ways, but this is the basic idea. Okay, let me close that and get rid of that and come back here. Okay, so quickly, I've talked about most of this already, so I can go through it quickly, and I think I'm probably running low on time. Distinguishing features of QCA, it is fundamentally set theoretic. It is not a linear technique. It assumes invariance. It assumes causal complexity. So this manifests in that we're interested in identifying necessary and sufficient conditions. The idea that there can be multiple paths to the same outcome, that is equifinality. There are not degrees of freedom restrictions, which means you can use it for small, medium, and large in analysis. QCA's sweet spot is in sort of the 12 to 50 range. Like if you got like that size data set, it works really, really well. But people are using it for large stuff. I've used it for really small stuff, as small as 9. Might have even done one with 6 once. That's ridiculously small, but you can do that as well. And as I showed in the example, what QCA really encourages is what we call retroductive analysis, that is moving back and forth between your theory and your data. So you're not simply doing hypothesis testing, you're not simply doing an exploratory analysis, you're moving back and forth between deduction and induction. You do have to calibrate your conditions. I'll talk about that a little bit. And your data does have to have both positive and negative outcomes. You can't do a QCA just if you have, if all of your cases have the outcome. And then, as I showed in the demonstration, identifying and resolving your contradictions is really a key element of making sense of your results. There are three analytic components of QCA: the calibration, the necessity testing, and the sufficiency testing. Calibration, this is an under-discussed aspect of QCA, and it can, especially for fuzzy set calibration, can be in some ways the most difficult part. I'm actually working on a paper on how to calibrate well right now. I'm going to be presenting it in about a week. But data calibration is the process of how do you actually construct a fuzzy set. You can, as I said, you can have crisp where everything's 0 or 1, or it can be fuzzy where it's continuous. The whole point here is that you're defining set memberships. So you're defining the degree of membership that one has in the set of rich people. That's different from a variable that's simply measuring annual income, or the degree of membership in the set of developed countries, which again is different than simply measuring GDP per capita. The main difference here is that in a conventional regression analysis, all you need is the measure of income. All you measure is the measure of GDP. For QCA, you need to be able to say, what does it mean to be rich? What does it mean for a country to be developed? That's a different thing. So you have to have some theoretical knowledge, you have to have some substantive knowledge to bring to the analysis. And that is why QCA is called qualitative comparative analysis. Even though it's formal, even though it's using Boolean mathematics, and I'll say lots of conventional qualitative researchers are like, what's so qualitative about this? It's all numbers and analysis, and you need to use software. The qualitative part is that our measures must be semantically meaningful. And that's really key to understand. So 1.0 means something. It means you're fully in the set of whatever you're interested in. 0 means you're not in that set at all. And in between means you have partial membership. And then when you're calibrating, you have to think a lot about what does it mean? What is the negation of your set? So your degree of membership in the set of not rich people is different than your degree of membership in the set of poor people. So you have to define those separately. In the same way, degree of membership in the set of not developed countries, right? You can define what it means to be a developed country. You define what it means to not be developed. Not being developed doesn't mean that you're underdeveloped, however. That would be a separate measure that you have to define. So you have asymmetry in your measures. Okay. QCA is mostly used to identify and analyze necessary and sufficient conditions. The necessity testing, I will tell you, is underdeveloped. Most QCA applications have focused on sufficiency testing. My own software does include rather sophisticated necessity testing. I myself have started for analyzing necessary conditions. I've started using another technique called NCA, necessary condition analysis. Necessary condition analysis is in fact a linear technique. It is not a set theoretic technique, but it has certain advantages over QCA's necessity testing. In particular, it can identify necessity in degree as well as in kind. And this is what I tend to be using more now. And I actually, the inventor of NCA and we're going to be presenting this in about a week, have developed a technique for combining the two techniques. So you essentially start with an NCA and then move to a QCA and link them together. And that's how I'm doing my stuff now. But it is something to pay attention to. People will talk about necessity testing, but then it's not done a whole lot in the QCA literature for various reasons. Most QCA focuses on sufficiency analysis, and the sufficiency analysis assumes causal complexity. It emphasizes what we call multiple conjunctural causation, which is basically the combination of two ideas, intersectionality and equifinality, that combinations of conditions explain empirical phenomenon, and equifinality is that different combinations of conditions can produce the same outcome. So what QCA gives you is, instead of going for sort of a very parsimonious explanation, QCA by default retains all the complexity. It retains all the nuance in the analysis to explain every case that it can. And then it's up to the researcher to figure out, okay, what's the sort of the best story here? How parsimonious of a solution do I want to present? And what we'll see in a little bit is that QCA actually provides you a range of solutions, all of which are empirically consistent, and you need to bring your own theoretical and substantive knowledge to interpreting those solutions and figuring out which one or ones sort of make the most sense. Because QCA can also produce solutions that are overly complex. They're too nuanced. They're including explanatory, or not explanatory, descriptive elements that aren't explanatory. It can also produce solutions that are overly simplistic. And so you need to sort of interpret the results that you get to figure out, okay, what really makes sense given my knowledge of the data, my knowledge of the cases, and my knowledge of the theory, my understanding of the theory that I'm using. There are two measures of model fit that you'll see. They are called consistency and coverage. Consistency simply measures the strength of a superset subset relationship, with 1.0 meaning perfect superset subset relationship, that every case in the subset is also a case of the superset. Coverage measures empirical importance of a particular solution. It is basically a measure of, given all the solutions that QCA has found, which ones are most prominent. That doesn't mean that they're the most important, but they're explaining the largest number of cases. So if you were analyzing like lung cancer, you're going to have very high coverage for smokers, because most cases of lung cancer occur amongst people who have smoked, but not all, right? So you can have really low coverage for other causes of lung cancer. That doesn't mean that they're not important. That it simply means that they're not as prominent. So that's important to understand. Okay, very quickly, I'm going to give a couple of examples here. This is a necessity analysis I did a while ago. This was using QCA necessity testing, not NCA. We were working on a project. This is an intervention to reduce acute kidney injury, that's AKI, acute kidney injury in pediatric patients, so at children's hospitals. And we had 9, this was the very small 9 hospitals in the study that implemented this intervention. And of those 9, 5 of them realized, after implementing this intervention, they realized a significant decrease in their AKI rate. So that was a great success. So, 5 had a reduction, 4 did not. What the necessity analysis revealed was that all of those hospitals that had a significant decrease, they started with a relatively high rate of AKI. Okay, they had a rate above 1.0. And so part of the logic there was, if you're starting relatively high, this intervention can work. But if you're already pretty good, it's not going to help you to reduce your AKI rate even more. So for this intervention to work, you needed the initial AKI rate that's relatively high. However, there was one hospital that did have this relatively high initial AKI rate, but it did not benefit from the intervention. So what we realized was starting with this AKI rate isn't sufficient, but it is necessary, because none of the hospitals, and it makes a lot of logical sense, none of the hospitals that succeeded, all of the hospitals that succeeded did start with this relatively high AKI rate, but just because a hospital had a relatively high AKI rate to start with didn't mean that it would succeed. So that's the idea of necessity. And so in our write-up, we're able to say, look, if you're already doing well, relatively well with the AKI, you probably don't want to use our intervention because it doesn't appear that it's going to work that well. You need to look for something more. Okay. Here's another example of, this is an example for sufficiency analysis. So this is another analysis that I was working on a little while ago. So I was working on it right before the pandemic, and then the pandemic waylaid our work on this. This is an analysis of Mexican women who had crossed into the US illegally. They had been caught and deported back to Mexico. And my colleague went down to the shelter where they were deported to right after they had been deported out of the US back to Mexico, and interviewed a bunch of these women. And one of the main questions that we had was, what do you plan to do next? Do you plan to try to cross again? Do you plan to go home, or do you not know? And what we found in this analysis is so this first big circle here are the recently deported women who do not plan to cross again. They're saying, okay, now I'm going home here. And we found sort of two sets that we could explain. We're not explaining all of them. We weren't able to explain all of them, but we found we're able to explain a lot of them in these two sets. So one set here are women who are not strongly connected to the US, and they have at least a high school education. The idea here is that they're not really strongly connected to the US. They don't have family here. They haven't lived here a long time. And they are educated, so they can get a job if they go back home. So a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them said, I'm going to go back home. Okay, not all of them. Some either said, I'm going to try and cross again, or that I don't know. And then the other group of women were women who were not strongly connected to the US. Their last crossing was lengthy. It took, this is so long ago, I think it took 3 or more days. And often crossing can, from where these women are coming from, generally it should only take 1 or 2 days. So it was a lengthy crossing. Maybe it was 4 to 6 days. I think that sounds more correct to me. I think it was 4 to 6 days. But they had a lengthy crossing, and during the crossing, they encountered bandits. They had a scary, threatening crossing. That doesn't mean that they were necessarily assaulted, but they were robbed. So these women were also saying, nope, many of these women, not all, but many of these women said, no, I do not plan to cross again. There's an overlap, these two sets. The women who belong to both sets, they almost all said that they were going to go home. Okay. So this is the type of analysis that QCA can give you. This is a causally complex analysis. And yeah, so that's an example. Okay, we are about out of time, but I'm very close to being done. I've got 2 slides left. So I mentioned there are a range of solutions that can be produced by QCA. Okay, they range from very complex and nuanced, very detail-oriented, very descriptive, to much more parsimonious. This is, example, these are the results of an analysis of attempts to get countries to comply with international fishing agreements. So basically, you know, what are the restrictions on fishing? And looking at how And so the outcome here is the successful shaming of targeted regimes as a way of getting these regimes, these countries, to comply with the international agreements. So the conditions that were analyzed here were scientific advice. Was there a formal commitment by the regime? The shadow of the future is sort of explain what are the consequences, how inconvenient is it to comply, and political and social reverberations. And we don't need to go into the details here too much. The point here is that the author found 3 basic types of solutions. This first one, the lowercase, is the absence of the condition. The uppercase is the presence of the condition. So we found they found 3 different recipes that would explain when these regimes complied with the fishing agreements. If you incorporate what we call logical remainders, this is essentially running a formalized counterfactual analysis, you can get a very simple solution that suggests, oh, these aspects might not matter so much, or over here, these aspects, the A and the I, might not matter depending upon your counterfactual analysis. Or you can use your theory to say, no, I'm looking at this, and for example, the advice of the scientific community is always present across all 3 solutions, so I don't want that to disappear even in my counterfactual analysis, so I'm going to retain that. And so you can construct these intermediate solutions, B, C, and D. You can do this manually. That's how I tend to do it, but that's mostly because I'm old school, and I was doing this before you could do it in the software. And so I still got to do it that way. But you can also use the software. You can put in your directional expectations, that is based upon your theoretical knowledge, your background knowledge about the cases. You can say, I think that these things, if they exist, should lead to the outcome. And so that's how you're performing a counterfactual analysis. And you can put that in the software, and the software can it will generate one of these solutions for you. Or you can, as I said, you can do it manually. So again, what QCA is doing is it's providing this range of solutions that you then, as the researcher, need to bring your theoretical and substantive knowledge to bear upon, to understand, to make sense of. Okay, final slide. There are 3 basic types of QCA projects out there. There are other things that you can do as well, but these are the main ones that I'm seeing and that I've done. So the most popular use of QCA is to understand causation, to uncover causal recipes, to try to figure out what are the invariant relationships, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions that lead to a particular outcome. Another type of analysis is to identify taxonomies and types and typologies. This is based upon the truth table analysis, which was that second step that I showed you in the software demonstration. Basically, you bring in your conditions, the software will generate a truth table, which is simply what are all the different types of cases that you have. And so you can look at that, and that can be an analysis in and of itself. You always construct a truth table when conducting a sufficiency analysis in QCA, but often people treat it as something that you do along the way. It can, however, it's an analysis unto itself. And I've done some work with basically generating different truth tables over time. This was one of my projects on film. I was interested in how film genre had changed over time. So I basically took snapshots of the most popular films over time and then compared the truth tables to figure out, oh, how are the genres changing? And then analyzing context. And this is often done along with the first type of uncovering causal recipes, but sometimes we're very interested in it's not so much about causation, but simply under what conditions does an outcome occur or not? And in particular, are there, like that medical intervention study, are there particular contexts in which an intervention is going to work versus not work? And so that's a really important idea. Instead of, it's very popular to think, oh, I want one package, I want one intervention that's going to work everywhere. But we know that that's not the case. So QCA is really good at figuring out, okay, we got this intervention, what are the, where is it going to work? And where should we look for something else? Where do we not want to waste the money, basically? Okay, those are my slides. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open things up for discussion. I hope it didn't go too long.
Thank you, Mr. Rubinson. It is very interesting presentation. Okay.
Oh, I'm not being able to hear you. That's, hold on.
Hello, Jack. Can you hear me, Mr. Claude Rubinson? Not yet.
Okay, maybe I can hear you now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
No.
Not yet.
Uh-oh. Technology. Oh, man. Here we go.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, I'm using my computer speaker. I'm changing. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Claude Rubinson. It is very interesting presentation. All right, we're going to the second section, which is Q&A. And for the participant, you can raise your hand if you want to ask and discuss directly with Mr. Rubinson. Also, beside that, you can also write your question in the chat box. Don't forget to open your cam and mic. Okay, we get question from Mr. Muhammad Jihan. Mr. Muhammad Jihan, do you want ask directly to Mr. Rubinson? If you want to ask directly to him, you can open your cam and your mic.
So I can see the question. So the question is, could QCA be applied in causal loop systems? I don't know what a causal loop system is. So I don't know. Can someone explain what a causal loop system is?
Mr. Jihan? Mr. Muhammad Jihan? Maybe you can explain more what is the meaning of causal loop system. Okay, maybe okay. Whoa, okay. Many participants raise hand. Okay, maybe we skip first the Mr. Muhammad Jihan. Okay, this. Who see the Miss Jojo? Okay, Miss Josica is Fulaili. Okay. Please, Miss Jojo. Where is Miss Jojo? Okay, maybe this the second. Miss Hani.
Okay. Hello. Good morning, Mister. I am Hani, a student of Industrial Engineering, Sebelas Maret University. I want to ask a question. Whether this method could be combined with statistical methods or others? Could you explain the possibility?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The question is, can QCA be combined with other statistical methods? The thing to understand about QCA is that it is a set theoretic technique based on Boolean algebra. And so it is asking a different type of question than conventional statistics. So if we think about sort of conventional net effects analysis like regression, it's really asking a different type of question. So net effects analysis would be, what are the individual contributions of your independent variables to the outcome? Whereas QCA is asking, how does the presence and absence of particular conditions, how do they combine in order to bring about or prevent an outcome from occurring? So what you don't want to do, what almost everyone does when they first learn QCA, I did it, everyone does it, is they say, I'm going to run an analysis using the same data set. I'm going to first run a regression or conventional statistical analysis of some sort, maybe a Bayesian, whatever it is. And then I'm going to run a QCA and I'm going to compare the results. And they get different results because the methods are asking different questions. So if you're going to combine them, what you want to do is you want to stage the analyses. So what you might do is run the regression first, figure out which variables are contributing to producing the outcome, and then use those variables in your QCA. Or something that I've seen that I really like, and I think it works really well, is to start with your QCA and figure out which combinations of conditions, we often call them recipes, which recipes lead to the outcome. And then you have two separate recipes, and then you run a regression within those recipes to figure out what are the independent contributions, with the idea of, oh, these different pathways are different. And therefore we wouldn't expect a single regression equation to explain both of them. And so that's what you want to do if you're going to combine the techniques, is you want to stage the analyses so that they really inform one another. So QCA can work really well with other types of techniques, I would say.
Okay, thanks for your answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rubinson. It is enough, Hani, Miss Hani? Okay, the explanation from Mr. Rubinson. Okay, so next question is, or maybe in the raised hand is Miss, well, welcome back, Miss Jojo, Miss Jessica.
Sorry for the connection.
Oh, okay, you're connected.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, first I would like to say thank you for the opportunity and good morning, Professor Robinson. My name is Jessica from Sebelas Maret University. I want to ask a question about the QCA is indeed appropriate for the small, medium, and large sample number analysis. So when or what condition is the best for using this method? Thank you.
Okay.
So can you say, you said, you broke up briefly. So you said QCA is appropriate for small, medium, and large ends. And then you were, what was the actual question though?
What's the best condition?
What condition is the best for using this method?
So I would say, the way that you're gonna, so QCA as a technical methodology, it will work equally well, right? The software is going to be fine with however many conditions you have. If you've got a small number of conditions or a large number of, a small number of cases or a large number of cases, QCA is going to work well. Now, what will happen is QCA is actually more constrained by the number of conditions you have. So if you have a whole lot of conditions, it's going to slow down. And our software is the fastest. The author has worked really hard to make QCA able to handle a large number of conditions. With my software, our FSQCA is a little faster than mine, but with my software, things really start to bog down around 12 explanatory conditions. So the number of cases doesn't matter technically, it's the number of conditions. In practice, however, if you've got a large number of cases, you're probably not that close to them. You probably don't know a whole lot about them, which means that you're going to be more reliant upon the software. In the example that I gave of the black strike breaking analysis, the authors they only had, what was it, 16 cases. So when they found an anomaly, they were able to go back and do more analysis and say, okay, what's really going on here? In a large N study, you're often just not going to be able to do that type of thing. And so you're not going to be able to sort of bring your case knowledge in as well. And so that's really the difference. So the software doesn't care, but the reason that we often say that the sweet spot for QCA is that middle range of somewhere between 12 and 50 cases is because that's the size at which it's too many cases to do really in-depth analysis on every single observation like a conventional qualitative researcher might, but it's too few to really do conventional statistical analysis because you just don't have a large enough N. And so QCA sort of hits that sweet spot. And that's one of the reasons it's really used for like comparative political research when you're looking at, countries and that type of thing. But it can work for everything. But what's going to change is sort of how much knowledge you as the researcher are going to be able to bring to the analysis. So I would say, yes, go with sort of 12 and higher. As I've said, as I showed, I've done really small N, but that can be pretty difficult to do in QCA too, because there's almost not enough analytic leverage because you have so few cases. So yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Okay, so it's appropriate for small, medium, and large, and just the research context, the research context and condition.
Yeah, most people are doing small and large at this point.
Yeah.
Sorry, medium and large. Sorry, medium and large. Most people are not doing very small N.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rubinson. Okay, Ms. Jojo, how's the answer from Mr. Rubinson? Is enough?
Yeah. Thank you for the explanation.
Okay. Okay, let's move. The next question is Miss Ima. Miss Ima.
Yeah, okay. Hello, Mr. Claude. I'm Emanuela, student of Industrial Engineering, Sebelas Maret University. I want to ask you a question. What is the minimum sample size in QCA? Can it be used in only 2 cases unit analysis because the basis being comparative?
Okay.
Can it be used in 2? I would say if you've got it that small, you don't need it. So like my dissertation, because I was a QCA, I was already doing QCA. In my dissertation, everyone was saying like, oh, you're going to do QCA, right? And I said, no, I only have 5 cases. Oh. Right, because I was looking at five regions. I was like, I can do it all by hand. I'll just make a 2x2 table. So if you're doing really small stuff, I was still sort of doing QCA, but I wasn't using the software because I didn't need the software. It wasn't complicated enough. So yeah, really small N. That's the other reason why you don't use QCA is you can just do it by hand.
Okay. Yes. If we have just only 2, maybe we just need table.
Yeah. That's it. That's basically it.
Yeah. Okay.
But I use the same logic, even with really small N stuff. If I'm not using the software, I'm still using the same logic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes, it's very logic. I have 7 cases in my dissertation. Only, it's small. It's only small. Yeah. But Mr. Rubinson said that only 5.
Yeah. So yeah, we can communicate about that and like how to make it work. But
it's work with 5 and 7, but not 2. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Miss Ima.
Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we shift to we still have time. Maybe 15 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's some in the chat. Do you want to call on people, or do you want to do some in the chat?
Okay, I will check the chat. Okay, the first Dicha. Okay, from Dicha. In your research experience, what's the difference between parsimonies, intermediate, and complex solution, and when or in what context is the usage of each of those solutions?
Yeah, so that's a good question, especially because I didn't explain it very well. when I was presenting. So let me see if I can try to explain a little bit better. So you're in engineering college, so you may be familiar with Quine-McCluskey minimization, switching circuit theory. So this is what QCA is doing behind the scenes is Quine-McCluskey minimization, which is basically minimizing Boolean expressions, right, mathematically. And so when you're minimizing a Boolean expression, you can either simply minimize to the existing min terms, or you can minimize down to the prime implicants, or you can minimize down, you can reduce the prime implicants. The way that you do that is, the way that we talked about in QCA is by using remainders. So in a truth table, I'm going to share my screen to show it. That'll make more sense. So share my screen. Okay, share. Okay, and now, whoops, I need to find that software again. Okay, so cancel this. So we'll go back to this truth table that Brown and Boswell constructed. If we just look at the rows that led to the outcome, there are just these two rows. We could decide we're just going to minimize to these rows. We're going to say these are the rows that these are the cities that had the outcome. We call that minimizing to the primitive expressions. And then we get these two Boolean expressions. So recent Black migration, weak union, and repressive government. Or recent Black migration and a weak union and repressive government. However, what we can do, and so that would be called prime implicants. When we do that, we can look at these two rows. So this row and then this row, and we can see the only difference between them is whether the union was weak or strong. So logically that must, but they both have the same outcome. So logically, the strength or weakness of the union must not matter. So this is what produces the complex solution. We say, oh, that doesn't matter. All that matters is Black migration, recent Black migration, and the presence of a repressive government. And so that is what produces the complex solution. And we get one result instead. Okay, so that is the simplest form of reduction, of minimization. You can go further, however, and you can look at these remainders. And the remainders, oh, there's only one remainder here in this analysis. But you can look at the remainders and you can say, what if? So a remainder is a row that didn't have any cases associated with it. There weren't any instances of recent Black migration, a weak union, but not a repressive government. So the question then is, what if it did exist? What if this type of case did exist and it led to the outcome? Let's bring it into the analysis and see if we can produce an even simpler solution. If you make that assumption for all of your remainders, you will produce what is called the parsimonious solution, which is the idea that it's going to bring in any simplifying assumptions if they produce any of the remainders, if they produce a simpler solution. The best way to think about it is that the parsimonious solution, I think in this case, the parsimonious solution is the same as the complex. Whoops, I did the wrong reduction, I apologize. Oh yeah, I don't have to do that. I'm being goofy. Yeah, it's the same in this instance. It doesn't make a difference in this instance. But essentially, if you bring in all the remainders like that, you get your lower bound of what are the conditions that cannot be removed from your results. Some people look at those as being the most causally explanatory condition, the most important conditions. There's some debate about that. But that's how some people think about it. But at a minimum, those are the conditions that cannot be removed from your analysis. And then you can have ones in between. So here we have the complex solution that had the minimum amount. This had no reduction. Sorry, this is the complex solution that had that minimum amount of reduction. This incorporated any remainders it could. Or what you can do is create these intermediate terms that basically are you playing God. It's you playing conducting counterfactual analysis so that to figure out which combinations of conditions do you think might lead to a simpler solution. So you can selectively incorporate remainders to get these intermediate solutions. Most people nowadays think that the intermediate solution is often the most useful because the complex solution is often overly complex and includes too much detail, and it can sort of include irrelevant detail. And the parsimonious solution is often overly simplistic because it's just made tons of assumptions regardless of their theoretical plausibility. So people tend to like the intermediate solution. What a lot of people do is they'll use particular techniques that allow you to present multiple solutions at once. And I have a paper on presenting QCA that shows how to do that in different ways, because it can be really useful to say, oh, here's the intermediate solution. This is the one that sort of makes the most sense theoretically, but here's also the parsimonious solution so that you can see which conditions cannot be removed from your solution that are sort of the core of your analysis.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually it's advanced question, yeah, Mr. Rubinson. It's related logical reminders like this, yeah. Okay. Maybe Miss Dicha, if you don't mind, maybe Mr. Rubinson, maybe Miss Dicha can, if Miss Dicha want to ask more deeply, he could ask you by email like that.
It's in all the readings. I mean, because you have to learn this. You have to learn about the different solutions when you learn QCA.
Okay.
So it's in all the readings, yeah, okay, about how to do it. But it's a little confusing at first, no question.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, and the next question is from Ms. Asintia. Okay, will QCA be widely applied and used in engineering? Okay.
Well, I can't predict the future. I hope so. I guess it depends upon what type of engineering you're talking about. And so certainly in trying to understand complex systems, I think it certainly has a role to play there. Mathematicians have become increasingly interested in QCA, and electrical engineers, people working in fuzzy set theory have become increasingly interested in it, in part because, they've already, the mathematics of fuzzy sets are far more advanced than what QCA is currently doing. Everyone who has mathematically looked at QCA has found no problems with it. And that's a really important point. So you'll find debates about the validity of QCA in the social scientific literature. There is none in the mathematical literature, which I think is important to recognize. So yeah. But if you're looking at electrical, certainly electrical engineering, they're already doing QCA because we stole it from them. Right, the basic logic is all comes out of electrical engineering. So in that situation for like Boolean minimization, switching circuit theory, actually it looks like someone already said that in the chat. So it's already there in certain ways. So it depends upon what type of engineering you're talking about. So that's my non-answer. I don't know.
Yeah, QCA use Boolean algebra. Yeah. It's from electrical engineering. Yes, yes, of course. Maybe it's potentially applied in engineering. Yeah, because I used this method. Yeah, I use this method in my case. Yeah, in project management, in construction. Yeah, like this, and it solved the complex condition or variable that's I analyzed like that. Okay. Okay, the next question is from Miss Gloria. Okay, what's the difference between necessary and unnecessary condition in QCA, and how does it impact the analysis?
Well, that's a very good question because I'm writing a paper on that. So I should have an answer. Right now, my answer would be way too long because I haven't streamlined it yet. The basic issue is that QCA provides these two types of analyses. So one for testing and identifying necessary conditions, and another for testing for and identifying sufficient conditions. What people haven't done a great job with yet is integrating those two analyses. And that's one of the things that we are trying to solve with our paper. But the basic idea is that if you find necessity, what you're saying is without the presence of this condition, you're not going to get the outcome. And that, the way I have always approached that is that should inform your sufficiency testing. Right. And so you need to figure out, there are various ways, and we go through this in the paper, which hopefully will be out within the next year, but there are various ways of integrating your necessity results into your sufficiency results so that that becomes clear that you need to have those necessary conditions present if you're going to have the outcome. If you don't find necessity, then you can move straight to the sufficiency analysis and figure out, okay, what conditions, when they're present, lead to the outcome. The interesting thing about sufficiency analysis, and what people really like about sufficiency analysis, is the idea that you might have equifinality, that you might have different paths of achieving the outcome. So it might be, I don't have a great example off the top of my head, but it might be that you need A and B to lead to the outcome, or that you need B and C. And that's something that conventional statistical analysis doesn't give you, right? That there are different ways. The metaphor we often use is there are different ways to make the same carrot cake, right? So you can have slightly different recipes, but you can still end up with the same results. And that's what people really like about the sufficiency analysis, is that causal complexity, that sense of nuance, that recognition that, oh, there are multiple ways that you might avoid poverty. That's important.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Rubinson. Okay. Then the next is Mr. Pringo. Mr. Pringo, would you give your opinion directly to Mr. Rubinson, or explain maybe to the engineering student?
Okay, thank you very much. Very nice presentation, Mr. Claude Robinson. Actually, I am one of industrial engineering. I usually teach automation, electronic, I also giving Boolean algebra for minimization and simplification for control and electronic. But now I know about the truth, the truth table to solve the problem in the complex area. So I think maybe I understand inside of your software, I think, but previously I don't understand why it can be used for this case or this area. So thank you very much for your insight. Knowledge.
Let me follow up on that just a little bit. Is that we use the term truth table, but it's a little bit different, right, than in electrical engineering, because what we're doing is we're manually coding that out, what we call the outcome, right, of is what we're interested in present or absent. I'm sorry. That kitten that I mentioned is acting crazy right now, and I need to make her silent. So I will be right back. So I'm just gonna, and I'm gonna grab her very quickly. So let me turn off my video for 1 second.
Kucingnya itu loh.
Oh, kucingnya anu ya.
Kucingnya crazy kan.
Oh, kucingnya crazy.
Okay. See, here's the kitten. Here's the kitten. Sorry about that. She is. No.
Okay.
So
please give one breakup for your cat.
Ya gitu. It's very funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now she's trying to drink my tea.
Okay. Is sufficient, Mr. Pringo? Okay. So
yes, I think okay.
Okay.
So one. Okay. Is it
again.
also you also using like Boolean algebra laws like associative, cumulative, De Morgan law, something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's something I've been working on.
For simplification, I think.
Yeah. So it's primarily so I would say. And you probably saw it in the presentation. When I introduce QCA now, I don't talk a whole lot about the Boolean algebra that's underlying it, because I think most people who are using it don't really need to know the math behind it so much. You need to know that it's a set theoretic technique, especially for calibration. You need to understand that you're creating sets, but knowing all the math, you don't really need. So I don't talk about it. I think most people who are presenting QCA probably talk a lot more about the Boolean algebra than I do, but I don't talk about the Boolean algebra too much. However, I've had to study it in depth to work on my software and to answer important questions about how to conduct QCA. So one of the things I'm really interested in, this is a very long-term project that I don't know when it'll come to fruition, but is analyzing is how to incorporate missing data into QCA. And to do that type of thing, you do have to implement, the full all the Boolean laws to make it work, to do that type of math underneath the scenes. So yeah, it has a very firm mathematical foundation, but I would say most people who are applying it don't need to worry about that too much. But those of us who are really working on the method itself do need to think a lot more about that.
Yeah.
In fact, usually like we use like normalization. This is also using normalization or calibration in.
Yeah, so the calibration, that's sort of a separate step. Which is basically making sure that all of your data is fuzzy, right? That's basically all it's ensuring, but there's a whole process of making, not that it's just on the 0 to 1 scale, but that it's meaningful. Because what you have to then do is that 1.0 has to mean the same thing for all your conditions, because what you're doing is analyzing superset subset relationships. So if you miscalibrate something, this is one of the difficult things with QCA is very sensitive to how you calibrate. And so it's considered very good practice to really pay attention to your calibrations, but also to test the robustness of your calibrations. So if you change your calibration a little bit, do you get really different results? If you do, maybe that's okay because you've calibrated properly, or maybe that's suggesting that your calibrations aren't so good. So QCA is very, very sensitive to how you calibrate, but that's really a prior step to actually doing the analysis itself. And the analysis itself, right, the software is going to just treat it pretty mechanically of, here's my truth table, I'm going to go ahead and reduce. It's up to you as the researcher to make sure that you have a truth table that is meaningful, that right, like, you look at it and say, what's going on with Cleveland, right? Oh, that probably belongs in a different row. Maybe I need a different truth table.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
Okay.
There's just a lot of places where for a good QCA, you need the researcher to really be in charge of the analysis. right? That's really key. It's not sort of a blender where you just, here's your data, let's run the analysis, and here are the results, right? You're just going to get a mess if you do that. The problem, and I'll warn everyone real quickly, the problem is you won't necessarily realize that you have a mess because everything's on a 0 to 1 scale. So the results almost always look good, right? It's not like your standard errors blow up and you've got like these ridiculous numbers. You have to really think about your results and say, do these make sense, right?
Okay. Maybe there are still many questions to you, Claude. However, we apologize to all participants because the time is limiting, so we have to end this session. Okay. And Mr. Claude Rubinson, if you don't mind, once again, maybe the participant could ask or discuss more this QCA topic by sending you an email like this. Yeah. Okay. Okay, for closing to this session, let me give some resumes, concluding remarks like this. QCA is a comparative method using Boolean algebra. And this method is fundamentally set theoretic, which has assumption, invariance, and causal complexity. And there can be multiple paths to the same outcome, or we say equivalence principle like this. And the interesting is no degrees of freedom restriction. So this method is appropriate for small, medium, and medium sample size. Yeah, sample size. Okay, after knowing this method, it's a great opportunity for us to utilize the QCA in our research like this. And thank you very much, Mr. Claude Rubinson, for the lecture today. We hope next maybe we can conduct guest lectures again with more advanced QCA and QCA material and discussion, and we could do the research maybe or project collaboration in the future. Okay, also someday we could meet in real, not online like okay. And if you want to visit our country, Indonesia, especially to the Sebelas Maret University in Surakarta, with pleasure we welcome you. Okay.
That would be wonderful, and it would be great to not wake up quite so early.
Okay.
So that would be...
Okay. For the last, thank you very much for the participants today. Hopefully this event will give beneficial for us. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Miss Selfie, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, I give the event back to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Oh, wow, thank you very much, Professor Rubinson, for the time and knowledge. And also, thank you to our beloved moderator, Dr. Nolan Darwati. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today's activity. For closing ceremony, the closing speech will be delivered by Head of Magister Industrial Engineering Faculty, Department, Sebelas Maret University. For Dr. Eko Bujanto, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Miss Vivi. Does my voice sound clear?
Yes.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good night to all of you, and especially for Prof. Rubinson. Good morning, Prof. Okay. Firstly, I would like to start to thanking you to Prof. Rubinson for excellent lecture and talk with passion about Qualitative Comparative Analysis, or QCA. Your lecture has opened our eyes that engineers need to understand about QCI, because the problem faced by engineers are not only quantitative problems, but also qualitative problems. Information for Prof. Rubinson: the majority of participants tonight have industrial engineering background. Secondly, thank you to the moderator, Dr. Retno Wulan Damayanti, who have guided and livened up the discussion tonight. However, most importantly, I would like to thank you all, the participants. You are all special. In my observation, the highest number of participants reached 193. Without your presence, without your question, without your discussion, this lecture would not have been the success it has. One of the pandemic lesson is that we are given the convenience of learning online. Of course, face-to-face lecture will be warmer and more enjoyable. For Professor Robinson, if the pandemic is over, we will gladly accept you if you come to Indonesia. Indonesia is a beautiful country. I am very happy that tonight in Indonesia and in the morning in Houston, enlightenment about QCA. I hope that this theme will be studied more by engineers in the future. Of course, it will be even better if engineers work with sociologists, especially to solve complex engineering problems, especially those involving society, like project management in huge project. It's not good if I talk long because it's pretty late and some of us have been working since the morning. Finally, I would like to thank the committee, the Industrial Engineering Quality System Laboratory Assistant who have prepared this event well. I am proud of all of you. Thanks to all of you. Good night and have a good rest. Wish you a sweet dream. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I return to MC, please, Miss Vivi.
Waalaikumsalam
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Eko Mujanto, for the speech. Before we close today's agenda, to all participants, please fill in the present link sent by the community via the chat room. Okay, that's all for today. Before leaving the Zoom room, to all participants, please activate your camera for documentation purpose. Okay, documentation team are welcome to documenting.
Okay, thank you, Vivi, for the opportunity. So now let's crystallize this moment together in form of a picture. And there will be 4 slides, and you may turn on your camera and let's take a picture starting from the first slide. 1, 2, 3, cheese. And the second one, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Third one, 1, 2, 3, cheese. And the last one, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, that's it from today. Thank you for your participation and back to you, Vivi.
Okay, thank you, documentation team. And thank you so much, everyone, for the time. And we apologize if there's any mistake that we may have done. And also to all participants, please fill in the present link sent by the committee via the chat room. I am Vivi and see you in the next guest lecture agenda. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Om Santi, Santi, Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Rubinson, once again.
No, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I really appreciate the invitation, and all of the questions were great. They were really good.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Rubinson.